Mr. DeFazio.
Gentleman's recognized.
I thank the gentleman. One of the most solemn duties given by us to the Constitution is before the House, because the resolution before us is most certainly a declaration of war. It lacks the specificity of the last declared war, World War II, but it closely mirrors the open-ended authority granted President Johnson in the Gulf of Tonkin resolution in 1964. The President is authorized to use the armed forces of the United States as he determines to be necessary and appropriate in order to defend the national security of the U.S. against the continuing threat posed by Iraq. That's it. That's the key part of this, despite all the whereases and everything else. So with this resolution, Congress will pre-authorize the first ever preemptive war in the history of the United States. A war that may be fought unilaterally, without a single ally, conducted without restraint or clear objective, potentially in violation of the UN Charter and widely accepted international law. I don't believe that our nation's founders would think that this was the proper use of our authority under Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. What is so extraordinary about Saddam Hussein and the threat he poses that would justify this broad grant of authority? What has changed in the 2 years since then candidate Bush said the United States will not be the world's 911, the world police force, and that we will not engage in nation building? Well, there were the horrendous attacks of September 11th, attacks against the United States, but neither the United States nor British intelligence services can find the slightest link between al-Qaeda and Iraq, so that can't be the reason. The President went to the UN 3 weeks ago, and he repeated in Cincinnati a long litany of charges against Iraq, most of them true. Saddam Hussein is a brutal, psychopathic dictator. He has committed crimes against humanity. He used chemical weapons against Iranian troops, against rebellious Kurds in his own country. He killed tens of thousands, but that was during the presidency of Ronald Reagan and Bush 41. And the United States turned a blind eye because Saddam was allied with the U.S. against Iran. He has violated a number of UN resolutions, but all long before the last presidential election. So something else must be behind this. Is this an attempt to obtain nuclear weapons? Well, 2 other members of the axis of evil are much further along. Iran has a very well-developed nuclear weapons program and much stronger ties proven to terrorist groups, including harboring al-Qaeda. And of course, North Korea has probably nuclear weapons and 2/3 of an almost functional intercontinental missile, which is having us rush to build Star Wars. So is that the reason? I don't know. This really seems to me there's something else going on here. Perhaps it's because the President brought a number of people from his father's administration who felt that they were frustrated because they didn't get to go to Baghdad the first time when Colin Powell and George Bush 41 stopped them short of that goal. But these men, these old men, these oil men, most of whom have never fought in a war or have never served in the military, are very deaf to the substantial concerns of Colin Powell, General Clark, and others who know war all too well. They're deaf to the concerns of Middle East experts and Arabists at the State Department and our intelligence services. They are deaf to the very vocal concerns of our allies around the world. They're deaf to the concerns of millions of Americans who have doubts about this adventure, and they're blind to the potential repercussions and the Pandora's box they will open with this war, the first war fought under the new Bush doctrine of preemptive war. Never has the United States of America launched a preemptive war. The prospect of the United States pursuing a unilateral preemptive war with Iraq with little or no support from allies in the international community is gravely disturbing, but the international application of this doctrine could launch a war against a threat, that is, the U.S. or a nation could launch a war against a threat or perceived threat by another nation. Just think, India and Pakistan, China, Taiwan, Russia, Georgia, the list is long and frightening. The administration proponents of this resolution would have us believe we have no option, but we do. Continued containment, deterrence, and intrusive unfettered inspections. There is a long list of the success of the last inspections rendered by Tony Blair to the Parliament, not by the Bush administration to the Congress. Destruction of 40,000 munitions for chemical weapons, 2,610 tons of chemical precursors, 411 tons of chemical warfare agents, dismantling of the prime chemical weapons development and production complex at Al Muthana, the destruction of 48 Scud-type missiles, the destruction of the Al Hakim biological weapons facility. The discovery in 1991 of samples of indigenously produced highly enriched uranium made them disclose their program, so that led to the removal and destruction of the infrastructure for the nuclear weapons program, including the Alethea Weaponization Testing Facility. Intrusive inspections, despite the harassment, did work. We do have an alternative. We should return to that regime. We should go with our allies under the auspices of the United Nations. We should root out and destroy his weapons of mass destruction. We have an opportunity and a proven alternative before us. Unfettered inspections, destruction of the arsenal, but it's not clear that that is the sole objective of this administration. War should be a first resort. No, war should be a last resort. Don't vote a blank check to this administration. They are all too determined to have this war no matter what occurs.